Where are we now with Brexit? We're in a situation where this government could walk out of the Brexit talks, threatening a no-deal scenario, which they have not thoroughly planned but are starting to plan now, and which would have huge ramifications. But how do we get to where we are? If you'd like a summary of all the craziness, this is it as best I understand it. The best place to start is just before May's Florence speech. At that stage, the government and the EU were stuck because of the sequencing. It had been agreed by the EU and also by the UK government that first Article 50 withdrawal is sorted out and then a new deal. So first all the bills are settled, then from that clean sheet status you make a new deal. This was something that, although the UK government agreed to, it had an objection with. It did not trust the EU or want to be seen to be paying money up front on the hope that later they will get a good deal. Rather, they wanted to tie the two together, whereas the EU didn't want to have these obligations, which the UK had already signed off on, be left until the end, so that we're threatening only to pay obligations if we get the deal we like. So it was that breakdown in trust that set up a stagnation. This is where May's Florence speech came in. She was hoping that by offering to actually pay that money and pair it with a transition phase that starts after we leave the EU, an implementation phase, then she would have a reason to offer the money, but also it would buy more time for her to do negotiations because her cabinet still can't decide on where they want to go. One day before May's Florence speech, Barnier gave a speech in which he said, if you want an implementation period, that's absolutely fine, but that's got to be implementing to where we know you want to go, where you want to go. If you don't know what that is yet, then it is hard to agree anything. An implementation phase is part of the final package, so first you sort out the finances and then we do a deal that can take, as long as you like. Alternatively, if you don't know where you're going, then what you need is just a time extension. And that's very simple to do. We push the deadline back. That means that you stay in the EU longer, but hey, if you need more time to think it through, that's what you need. Those are your two options. Now, Theresa May was asking for something different, so she couldn't change her speech in just one day. And besides, the cabinet were divided, and so she went ahead with her speech anyway, hoping that this would go over the head of Barnier to their EU heads of state, who would all then put pressure on Barnier to say, you know what, if we get the money so it doesn't disrupt our budgets, maybe we can then drop concerns about the sequencing and go and do a bespoke transition period and talk about that now. That's what she was hoping for, but of course all of the EU heads of state have already backed Barnier's position. But nevertheless, you never know what may have come out. We've now got the news back from France and Germany that no, it's a case of just sort out the sequencing, just get it done, and then we can go on to deal making. So we're back in this blockage, as it were. Now, the sensible thing to do, as far as I'm concerned, would be to pay the money, because this is not extra money for a bill. This is money that we would have been paying anyway if we'd remained. We're just pulling the plug later rather than earlier. Also, it is money that was promised by Vote Leave to the British public in the form of we will pay into EU programmes until 2020, keeping all of that stable. And then it would be sensible to craft a Brexit plan of going into the EEA and Customs Union and just say, this is our initial step to find our footing, and then we'll take a look-see. But the Brexiteers who are driving this thing are so hardcore, they're scared of going to that place and then the public actually liking it. Rather, they want to pull us out of the whole shebang and lock the door. So, this is why we are now getting threats of a walkout, that we would walk out of the whole thing to show the EU that we're serious and we're looking at a no-deal scenario. The German industry are looking at a no-deal scenario and prepping their companies on that. German industries in the UK employ about 400,000 people. And more people are taking this seriously as a scenario. This is also why the Commission are starting to look to the Labour Party for discussions, because the Labour Party understand the UK public and UK electorate arguably better than the Conservatives do at the moment. And also, should the Conservative government fail in any way, shape or form, they want to know how Labour would take over. Because the Conservative cabinet is really falling apart now. You've got games going on within the cabinet. If you see the Sunday Times from yesterday, it was all about replacing May and moves to replace May. If May gets replaced, then who comes in? Or is there pressure being put on May in order to, for example, promote Gove, because he doesn't want to be Environment Secretary, he wants to be Treasurer or something like that, and certainly get rid of Philip Hammond, the last adult in the cabinet. So there's lots of Machiavellian machinations going on, in cahoots, of course, with the pro-Brexit press barons, and so we're in a hell of a mess at the moment, and companies, I think, are starting to prepare for the worst. This could all have been avoided, and in fact the blame I would put squarely on the hard Brexiteers themselves, who want to kick off aggression with the EU and storm out, rather than supporting anything that's actually workable in the middle. And I think that's where the real danger is, because if our country starts going down that path, then it can get quite dark quite quickly.